Madison Lane and Tyler Brooks were the kind of couple people envied. They met during their junior year at university, both ambitious, attractive, and full of life. Tyler studied business, while Madison majored in digital media and quickly gained attention for her fashion blog. Their relationship developed quickly, and by graduation, they had moved into a cozy two-story house in a quiet neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. On social media, they were the picture of happiness: sunset selfies, matching holiday pajamas, and weekend brunches that made followers gush with admiration. Madison's Instagram was filled with curated snapshots of their life together, and Tyler often appeared as the supportive boyfriend who always stood by her side. But behind the smiling photos and filtered stories, cracks had started to form. Madison's online presence wasn't growing like it used to. Brands that once offered her sponsorships had stopped responding. Her content was becoming repetitive, and followers were slowly losing interest. She tried to reinvent her image: more makeup tutorials, daily vlogs, wellness routines, but the views didn't come back. Meanwhile, Tyler's real estate career was taking off. He closed several high-end deals within months and became the youngest agent in his firm to earn a six-figure commission. On top of that, he recently inherited a substantial amount from his grandfather's estate. Suddenly, Tyler had wealth, influence, and attention Madison no longer commanded. The shift in their dynamic was subtle at first. Madison began to withdraw, her posts becoming more infrequent. She rarely smiled in photos that included Tyler. Friends noticed the distance, but chalked it up to stress. What no one could see, however, was the slow unraveling happening behind the scenes. Madison was watching her life slide out of focus, and deep down, she felt like a supporting character in someone else's story. She wanted control back, whatever it took. On the evening of October 12th, Tyler Brooks failed to show up for a scheduled property showing with an important client. At first, his coworkers assumed he was caught in traffic or had mixed up the time. But when calls went unanswered and texts remained unread, concerns started to grow. Tyler was known for being punctual and professional. Missing an appointment without notice was completely out of character. That night, he didn't return calls from his sister or respond to messages from friends. By the next morning, his phone had stopped ringing altogether. Madison told friends and neighbors that Tyler had left after an argument, saying he needed space. According to her, he had packed a small bag and driven off in the middle of the night. She seemed shaken but calm, claiming he'd done this before when stressed. When police officers came to the house to follow up on the missing person report filed by Tyler's sister, Madison repeated the same story. She said they had been arguing more lately, and that Tyler probably just needed a few days away. But something didn't add up. Tyler's car was still parked in the driveway. His keys and wallet were missing, but his suitcase and work laptop were untouched. His phone continued to ping from an area near their neighborhood before eventually going dark. No recent bank activity. No sightings. No security footage of him leaving the house. Friends and family began posting about his disappearance on social media, urging anyone with information to come forward. The story gained local attention, and search efforts intensified. As days passed, Madison's behavior grew more suspicious. She rarely left the house, avoided calls from Tyler's family, and declined interviews with local media. Everyone had one question: where was Tyler Brooks? 3 days after Tyler Brooks was officially reported missing, a tip came in to the local police department. The caller refused to give a name, but claimed they had seen something strange in Madison and Tyler's backyard a few nights earlier: movement near the shed, in the early morning hours, and what looked like fresh soil being dug up. The police had already grown suspicious of Madison's story, and this was enough to obtain a search warrant. On a cloudy Saturday afternoon, officers arrived at the Lane Brooks residence with a forensics team and cadaver dogs. They focused their attention on the backyard, particularly around the small wooden shed Madison used for storage. The dogs quickly reacted to one corner of the yard, pawing and whining at the soil. Within minutes, the team began digging. Just beneath the surface, wrapped tightly in a tarp and plastic sheeting, they found human remains. Dental records would later confirm it was Tyler Brooks. The body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the skull, and his wrists were bound with heavy-duty zip ties. A plastic bag was tied over his head. It was no accident. It was a calculated killing. Neighbors watched from behind blinds as crime scene tape was strung around the property. The peaceful image of the influencer couple was shattered in an instant. Madison was immediately taken in for further questioning. She sobbed, insisting she had no idea how the body ended up there. She said someone must have broken in and done it while she was asleep. But her emotions didn't seem to match her words. She never asked to see Tyler. She never demanded justice. And detectives noticed how carefully clean the garage and shed had been. Almost too clean. It was clear that Madison's version of events was starting to fall apart. Detectives knew that Madison's story was unraveling, but they needed hard evidence. They began by collecting surveillance footage from nearby homes. Several houses on the street had motion-activated cameras pointed toward the road or their driveways. After reviewing over 20 hours of footage, investigators made a critical discovery. At 3:14 a.m. on the night Tyler disappeared, Madison was seen dragging a large black trash bag from the garage toward the backyard. She paused often, clearly struggling with the weight. There was no sign of anyone else entering or leaving the property that night. Her claim that someone else had broken in and killed Tyler quietly crumbled under the weight of this footage. Investigators then turned their attention to Madison's digital activity. A forensic team examined her laptop and phone, uncovering an unsettling trail of internet searches in the weeks leading up to the murder. The search history included phrases like, "How to knock someone unconscious," "Zip tie injuries on skin," "Can you inherit if not married," and "How long for a body to start smelling." Though she had deleted many of these entries, forensic software recovered them all. Even more telling were the deleted text messages between Madison and an ex-boyfriend. In one message, she vented about Tyler controlling the money. In another, she said, "Sometimes I think life would be easier without him." The messages didn't outright mention murder, but the tone was dark and the timing suspicious. Detectives also discovered that Madison had recently looked into changing the beneficiary on Tyler's life insurance policy, though the process was incomplete. Her fingerprints were found on the zip ties used to bind Tyler's wrists and on the plastic bag recovered from the scene. Every piece of evidence pointed in one direction, and it wasn't toward a break-in. With overwhelming evidence in hand, investigators decided it was time to bring Madison back in for what they called a follow-up interview. She arrived with her attorney, dressed carefully and composed, believing she still had control over the situation. She had maintained a calm front during the initial questioning and assumed that sticking to her original story would keep her safe. But this time, the tone was different. The investigators didn't ask many questions, they laid out facts. They began with the surveillance footage, showing her dragging the heavy bag into the backyard in the middle of the night. Then they displayed images from her browser history, each search carefully time-stamped. One investigator opened a folder filled with crime scene photos, the zip ties, the plastic bag, the tarp. They explained how her fingerprints matched those found on every object. Finally, they revealed the recovered text messages, the ones she thought were deleted for good. Madison's expression shifted slowly. Her posture stiffened, and her confident gaze dropped. Her hands, folded neatly in her lap, began to tremble. She glanced at her attorney, who whispered something into her ear, but the damage was done. Her mask cracked in real time. She realized, at that exact moment, that everything was over. The lies had caught up. The plan had failed, and there was no way out. She didn't speak. She didn't fight. She simply lowered her head and closed her eyes, as if trying to wake from a nightmare she had created herself. That was the moment Madison Lane, once an online star with a perfect image, fully understood she had been caught. Within minutes, she was placed under arrest for the murder of Tyler Brooks. The perfect couple was no more. The truth had finally shattered the illusion. The trial of Madison Lane began 6 months after her arrest, drawing national media attention. Once celebrated for her glamorous lifestyle and social media fame, she now entered the courtroom in a beige jumpsuit, no makeup, and shackled at the wrists. The courtroom was packed each day with reporters, former fans, and heartbroken family members of Tyler Brooks. Prosecutors presented the case with devastating clarity, outlining a timeline that left little room for doubt. They revealed how Madison had carefully planned the murder over several weeks. She poisoned Tyler's wine with crushed sleeping pills to weaken him. Once he lost consciousness, she struck him with a dumbbell, causing blunt force trauma. Then, using zip ties to bind his hands, she placed a plastic bag over his head and suffocated him. For nearly 2 days, she kept the body in the garage, wrapped in a tarp, while pretending Tyler had simply left after a fight. When decomposition began, she buried him in a shallow grave behind the shed. The motive was chilling. Tyler had recently updated his will to remove Madison, intending to break up with her and move out. He hadn't told her yet, but she found out through an email left open on his laptop. In her eyes, everything she had built, her online image, her lifestyle, her relationship, was slipping away. Rather than lose it all, she made a calculated decision to eliminate the one person standing in her way. The defense tried to argue emotional instability and claim the murder wasn't premeditated, but the jury didn't buy it. After less than 4 hours of deliberation, they found Madison Lane guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Her social media accounts were deleted, her legacy erased. All that remained was the story of how far she went to keep the image alive, until it destroyed everything.